Namaskar, my name is Gaurav Rastogi and this is a conversation about Karma Yoga. Hindu Community Institute began and begins and continues to work as a school for Karma Yoga in selfless learning and service, this cycle of learning and serving. Today, in this conversation, I'm going to talk about Karma Yoga itself, which is a selfless service that nonetheless, while being selfless, satisfies the self as well. We are all born with an innate ability to walk, and we must still each be taught by our parents to walk. It is our nature to serve also as a social species, and it is, and yet there, all societies have to find ways and avenues to teach our members to serve. And that's the project of Hindu Community Institute, which is teaching us to learn to serve, which is a lifelong gift that enhances and enriches each one of us. Now, conventionally, Karma Yoga sits into the Hindu tradition as part of three different ways of union with God. Yoga, of course, itself means the union of the lower self to the higher self. And the three main ways that are described are the path of Jnana Yoga, the path of wisdom and knowing, the path of Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, and the path of Karma Yoga, the path of action and work. Now, conventionally, there are schools for Bhakti Yoga, of course. There are schools for Jnana Yoga, but there are not many schools for Karma Yoga. And HCI's ambition is to become an important and deep resource for Karma Yoga for the community. These three yogas, while the tradition holds, or while the convention is that these are separate and there should be separate schools, we will, in today's class, explore how these are not really separated in ideological boxes, but really intertwined like a braid. You cannot have one without the other. Wisdom must lead to action from that state of wisdom. Bhakti and devotion must, again, the act of serving in a state of bhakti is what we're talking about. So, an intertwining of these ideas together is what we're talking about, not standalone silos of practical philosophy, but intertwined. Today, our focus, of course, is specifically on Karma Yoga, and we will cover it at length. My introduction to Karma Yoga begins with my father. I talk about him a little later today, where one of the mottos he lived by was work is worship. And that is one of the central ideas of work is and as a form of worship. Is a very acceptable definition of Karma Yoga, and we'll cover that and more. After that, I spent a long time reading the Bhagavad-Gita, but also reading modern texts and psychology, and also studying my own self and my own engagement with work, and where I find and derive satisfaction and joy. And so I come to you with a lot of personal perspective into this timeless philosophy of Karma Yoga. Over time, I've come to the conclusion that these three are not separate strands, like I talked about, and I've created a framework which I hope to spend the rest of my life articulating, which is the yoga of living deeply, which is engaging, taking all the ideas of Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga, and all the practices that come along with it, and then deploy them at work and teach them in a way that is practical and that is transferable from one person to another, because that has been always the project of the teachings, to convey it in a way that transmits and provides meaning to future generations. So that's the background with which I come in. Now, Bhagavad-Gita is our source text for Karma Yoga. And the context of the Bhagavad-Gita, of course, is that here is there are two armies that are arrayed together for battle. They have exhausted all avenues for peace, and now war is the only option remaining. And the Bhagavad Gita comes at a very dramatic moment in the story of the Mahabharata, where the two sides are at battle for completely different reasons. One for the sake of the self, and the other for the sake of the society, Dharma itself. Dharma is that which binds society. So what is right for society versus what is right from a personal perspective. And in this context, Arjun, who's on the side of the people looking to restore a better sense of society, Dharma, Arjun is the most adept warrior. He is an archer. He is trained for exactly this purpose, but he comes at this battle and he immediately is confused. He's thrown into a state of philosophical confusion and disarray, and he decides that he's better off not fighting at all. This lack of decisiveness is vexing. And the entire 8 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are really a conversation between Bhagavan Sri Krishna and Arjun. And the object of this conversation is to remove that confusion and give Arjun this sense of decisive courage that he needs to engage into battle. Ultimately, the decision is left to Arjun, but Arjun has decided and he goes on to battle. But these 18 chapters are a rich trove of insight into the human condition, into a practical philosophy. That's not merely philosophy for the sake of philosophy, but philosophy that can be engaged into our daily lives. And Karma Yoga is deeply soaked into the entire text of the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, all of the Mahabharata is really about this conversation. But Karma Yoga is not one verse or two verses alone. And today's project for us is to really tease out a few interesting things that we can do in today's time, and later we might have longer conversation over the rest of our lives about Karma Yoga itself. Today I'm going to talk about Karma Yoga as union of the lower self to the higher self, which is the traditional definition of yoga itself. Yoga, of course, comes from the Sanskrit word yuj, which means to join, union of the lower self to the higher self by means of action, by means of devotion, by means of knowledge or logic, or by direct perception through meditation, acquiring that union, but also now acting in that state of union in the world. That's the project of Karma Yoga, in fact, all yoga itself. Karma Yoga specifically deals with action itself. Now, I'd like to begin today's conversation with a sort of demonstration, a personal demonstration that I'd like to encourage you to participate in. Let me give you the context first. I'd like to tell you in today's talk that truly engaging in Karma Yoga requires a change of perspective. We see the world ordinarily as a world where we exist independent of the world, and the world is outside of us somehow. The vision of yoga and in general is to understand that the world does not sit outside of us at all. The same energy that illuminates our insides also creates the world outside. The world itself is projected from within. And what seems to be our individual separated self is just a marginal experience between the outside world and the inside world, sitting at the border of those two interactions. The entire world seems to be opened out in front of us. An infinite universe, and possibly many, many universes, infinite number of universes out there. Imagine that degree of infinity outside our eyes, and a light that is illuminating our consciousness. For what separates this physical body alive from the physical body when it's dead is simply this light of consciousness. So the true source of ourself is not the physical body, but that light of consciousness, and that energy, that spirit that animates, that brings to life this physical form. Understanding the unity of those energies and that consciousness is yoga. Understanding that the inside and the outside are only separated by a thin layer, which we provisionally think of as ourselves. Once we understand that, we can understand the idea of yoga itself. Now we're going to try to do that through a practical demonstration. This is a demonstration of the flow of energy itself. This is a meditative experience that I'd like to engage you with. We are going to explore the flow of energy from within and the merging of this energy with the world outside. It begins with complete and utter surrender of the self. We're going to bring our attention to the heart, and we will dissolve our individuality into a collective sense of consciousness. We will expand our consciousness beyond ourselves and experience a flowing of energy, which is timeless and eternal, a sense of joy, ananda, in action. We do this with an Om chant. So as we chant Om, you're going to follow along and try to bring your attention to the experience itself. I will guide you through this experience. Listen without any sense of direction. I'm not asking you to conjure up imaginations. I'm asking you to investigate them and understand those experiences. We're going to chant a long Om sound. This long Om sound will come from our heart. Before we begin, we invite the source of everything, your favorite divinity in a personalized form or impersonal form, it does not matter, but a sense of invitation of the divinity into the heart, right here at the heart chakra. We invite this divine into our heart, and we invite them to engage and animate and illuminate our being. And then we listen to the chanting of the Om. And we observe the long flowing Om sound, and then evaluate an expansion, dissolution of the self. All there is the sound of Om. All there is the energy of Om, the vibration of Om, the flow which is timeless, which we experience sometimes as ourselves, but it exists outside of our individuality. Some of these things will come with experience. Some of these things will come with deep insight. It may not be that you will arrive at it in this one sitting of Om chanting, but I'd like to invite you to engage and explore. Come back to this as many times as you can and try to feel that sense of surrender, feel that sense of expansion as you chant Om in a long and pleasant form. We're going to open our mouth wide, open our heart wide, and we're going to chant Om in a loud, energetic manner that is pleasing to us. Not so loud that it is harsh, not so low that it's not energetic. Feel the energy and the vibration at an optimal level. Lot to take in. Now I invite you to sit comfortably, sit in any comfortable posture. Sit with your back straight, the back, neck, and head in a straight line. Close your eyes gently and relax the expression on the face. The back is straight but not stiff. The back, neck, and head are in a straight line. The eyes are closed gently. The expression on the face is relaxed. The shoulders are relaxed. The belly moves freely with the breath. As you inhale, let the belly expand. As you exhale, let go and relax. Now, bring a gentle quarter moon smile, to your face. Hold the smile. As you breathe in, let the smile travel all the way down to your heart. Feel that warmth in your heart. Still breathing into the belly, sitting with the back straight. Still smiling, and the smiling transmitting that vibration into the heart, and the heart tingling with that feeling of joy that follows the smile. Bring your attention to the heart and feel your heart at the center of the chest, right below the lungs, right at the bottom of the rib cage above the belly. In this cave of the heart, think of your own dearest form of divinity. For me, this is Bhagwan Sri Krishna. For you, it might be Ganesha, Hanuman, Bhagwan Ram, or just the universe itself, an energy that has no name or form. Whatever draws your heart, attracts itself to your heart. Think of that divinity and invite them, bringing your palms together in Namaskar Mudra. Invite that form of divinity to come reside in your heart. Feel them now moving into your heart. Feel their benign and loving presence in your heart and that glow and warmth now in your heart. Now we're going to chant Om with a deep sense of surrender, no expectation. Surrender your entire being in this chanting of Om and listen carefully to the sound. Pay close attention also to the vibration of Om in your heart. Keep your attention at the heart space, at the divine that is now situated in your heart. We're going to make a long and loud Om chant. Exhale completely, take a deep breath. Inhale. Keep your palms together, sit in silence and pay attention to the heart. Feel a sense of warmth and space opening up in the heart center. Feel that tingling vibration from Om still continuing. We're going to chant Om again, loud and long. Surrender your entire being to it. Leave no ounce of energy behind. Pour your entire being into this Om chanting, the sweetness of which now fills your heart. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Silence and observation. Now, when we chant Om one more time, pay attention to the sound itself, seemingly existing on its own. This body merely an instrument for that sound to express itself and to experience its own bliss and grandeur. Om chant once again, paying attention to the sound itself. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. The vibrating sounds fills the heart, fills the body, radiates out from our being and fills the entire universe. A sense of expanded, timeless space. Sitting in silence and observing. Now, rub your palms together to generate some heat. Gently cup your eyeballs to transfer that heat. There is no need to rush, just take your time. Now, blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back like an open book. Welcome back. This experience of being filled with divinity, not merely the self, but this entire universe being filled with divinity, and this body being an instrument of that divine self to express and experience itself. That action can be also the experience of Karma Yoga itself. Now, I'd like to give you some containers to carry back today's lecture. You can now carry the entire talk in one hand. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about the mnemonic device that we're using of the hand as a way of remembering. The hand, of course, this is also a pun. The hand in Sanskrit is kara, and karma, of course, is action. So think of one hand as remembering your karma yoga. We're going to use several parts of the hand, 7 parts, to carry 7 things with us. The wrist itself, the palm of the hand, the thumb, the pointing finger, the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky finger. 5 fingers, the palm, and the wrist. These are the 7 places we're going to store information from today's talk and take it back with us. And so whenever we want, any time in our life, we want to remember the principles outlined in today's talk, you just look at your hand and everything comes back again. Now, the ideas we're going to encode into our hand are as follows. The wrist is kalai. Kalai is the Sanskrit and Hindi word for wrist, and kala, the idea of time itself. Of course, the wrist is where you wear your watch. So the idea of time itself is encoded in the wrist. Kartala. Kartala is the little shallow pool in the center of the palm. Kartala is this. And the sense of karta, or the sense of doership or non-doership, will be encoded in the palm of the hand. The thumb, the opposable thumb, is a hallmark of humans because we have an opposable thumb, so we may hold a pen or a tool in our hand. Other apes and other creatures don't have an opposable thumb. So this skill, kaushalam, is what we're going to encode into the thumb. The pointing finger points at you and at ourselves as well. And this finger is now currently pointing at us. Swadharma, our own natural duties, is what we're going to encode here. The middle finger is, of course, in modern language known as flipping the bird. The middle finger talks about nishkama karma, working without hankering after the fruits of one's labors. The ring finger is engagement with others, and holding samadrishti, a sense of equality and a sense of an extended sense of the self, is encoded into the ring finger. And the little finger is where you might form a pinky promise with a little first child. Promises, shraddha and faith is what we're going to cover in the pinky finger. So 7 concepts: the idea of time, the idea of non-doership, the idea of skill and excellence, the idea of our own prescribed duties, the idea of nishkama karma, the idea of samadrishti, or looking at everyone with an equal view, success and failure as well, and finally, the idea of faith and unshakable, undoubting faith as a key part of Karma Yoga. These are the 7 ideas we're going to cover today in today's talk. You're also going to find in today's talk a list of references of Bhagavad-Gita shlokas that I'm going to refer to. These are a small handful of shlokas. These ideas resonate and ricochet through the entire text of the Bhagavad-Gita and indeed all of Mahabharata. But these specific verses have a laser sharp focus on that specific idea itself. Those are listed in this in the presentation that you're going to carry. Now, we're going to talk about our personal dharma. We're going to begin with the pointing finger. And interestingly, this image of Sri Krishna that we're using with Arjuna in conversation begins with Sri Krishna holding his pointing finger up. This is, of course, where the Sudarshan Chakra is as well. But he holds his pointing finger, and that's what we're going to remember as Swadharma. To understand and to have a high degree of integrity and fidelity with our personal dharma. This is an important concept because often we do not have a good sense of who we are as people and how we may act in this world, knowing who we are and what our purpose is. This purpose is inborn to us and intuitive to us. We understand it if we only look carefully. Shreyan swadharmo vikanaha paradharmat svanushthitat swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 2, verse 35. It is far better to perform one's natural prescribed duties, though tinged with faults, than to perform another's prescribed duty, though perfectly. In fact, it is preferable to die in the discharge of one's duty than to follow the path of another, which is fraught with danger. Swadharma is our natural duty. But how may we understand our natural duty? And why is it hard for us to understand our natural drives and purpose? I'll give you an interesting example. A few examples from the animal kingdom to illustrate the point. Our innate nature is inborn and intuitive to us. It precedes language, it precedes cognitive understanding or later explanation and storytelling. We just know what our nature is. And for this, I'd like to talk to you about Gator Dharma. So, alligators in Florida are cold-blooded creatures. They live in the tropical regions where the water and the sun are warm. And they have done so for millions of years. They are essentially tropical creatures. And over this period of millions of years have had not very much interactions with ice cold freezing water. But in North America, in the northern states of North America, some gators exist. And something interesting and fascinating happens in the months of winter, where the lakes and water bodies freeze over. Now, as these water bodies freeze over, an interesting phenomena results, where the alligators, with no memory of being in of this alligator or their parents for hundreds or thousands or millions of generations, they have not been exposed to icy cold water. And yet, in these streams or ponds where gators live in the northern part of North America, you will see gators poke their snout up above water, just their nose up above water, and then freeze the rest of their body. Enough for their nose to continue to breathe, just a little, so that they may survive the cold ice. And then when they come out the other side, they're able to thaw out and live their lives as normal. So who teaches the gator how to poke their nose up above water? Certainly their parents did not do it. It is not something that they are taught. It's just something that they know. And that knowing itself is what makes the whole thing interesting. That even gators know their dharma. What they need to do at any given point of time is known to the alligators. It is also known to the ants. Now, in the animal kingdom, in the ant kingdom, you have what are called polymorphic species. Polymorphic means many shapes. And ant dharma can be very interesting as well. Ants, you see, specific types of ants can actually be born in many different shapes. The same ant, but it can be a small minor worker, a media worker, or a giant ant, or a very tiny minim worker, or the queen ant. All of these, queen ant with wings, unbelievably, all of these are not different species of ants. It's the same species. They're just born in different shapes and sizes, and they all have different roles to play. The small workers forage. The middle workers do a lot of the heavy lifting. The larger ones act in defense. Some of the small workers guard the nest. Some small workers even fan the nest. Very interesting division of labor that exists. But here's the question for you. Do these ants go to an ant school where they must be taught the ways of their, people like them, ants like them? And the answer is no, this is not a socially communicated fact. They do have sophisticated means of social communication through their tentacles, through their antennae. But in this case, their purpose is innate to them. They know what they exist for. Their knowledge of the self is not necessarily socially communicated. Their actions are coordinated, which is why you see ant trails and armies of ants fighting each other. Very sophisticated actions. So the entomologist and ant biologist E.O. Wilson, who expired very recently, he did fantastic work in the social life of ants and understanding how the rules of that social behavior can be used to understand the rules of our own social behavior. But in this piece, I'm asking you to look at ant dharma. How does this ant know their true nature? And the answer is they just know. It's innate to them. They're able to tune into that. How is it that we don't know? I'll give you one more example, and this is Valmika Dharma in action. Very interesting video that I'd like you to watch, and I'd like you to take a few moments to let your eyes settle so you really understand what is going on. What's going on is just amazing. You're seeing a few large ants or creatures and a few small creatures. Some are moving, some are standing. I'd like you to observe the creatures that are standing. There are the larger ants, and right next to them, opposite them, are termites. They have now engaged in a sort of truce, where essentially battle lines are drawn. They're not actually at war. They're essentially a defensive shield across like a zipper. Ant, termite, ant, termite, ant, termite, all the way across, and right behind them are the trade routes where the ants and termites are engaging in their own commerce of leaves or dead creatures or whatever it is that they're transmitting. So imagine and understand this. This is Valmika Dharma. Valmika is termites. Valmika Dharma in action. These termites know their action. These ants know what they need to do. Their job is, they're warriors, and their job is to protect their horde. And so, how do we understand our Swadharma? We must truly travel within ourselves to develop a more sophisticated understanding of our true nature. We must understand our true nature in context. How do I need to behave in this particular context? And that context will pull out the best of us if we are paying attention to our innermost nature and to what brings us joy and meaning. And under different circumstances, we might act differently. There's been a lot of study done on heroic people. There are ordinary people who exhibit heroic properties at specific instances. For example, someone's jumped into a train line and another person dives in to swoop and scoop them out just in time. And they ask that person, the second person, the one who's heroically rescuing the first person, what were you thinking? And the interesting fact that comes across, that strikes me and should strike you hopefully, is that they say that it wasn't, you'd think that there's some sort of rational calculus that they're doing, they're doing some sort of, gears are churning in their head and they're thinking, well, my life is worth zero point 0x units, this person's life is worth some other units, and the optimal calculation is that I must rescue this person at the risk of dying myself. The probability of my dying is this much, the probability of success is that much. Very complex math. Now, modern economists and scientists tend to philosophize their action. But in this moment, there's not much of that going on. And when you survey people that are acting in heroic ways, the answer comes back to, I wasn't thinking, I was just doing it. I needed to do it, and so I did it. They just knew what they needed to do and they executed on it. And so the first point of Karma Yoga that I'd like to talk about to take home is Swadharma itself. How do we know what we're here to do? How do we understand our personal dharma? Our personal dharma depends on a wide variety of things, on our own inner nature, of course, on our role in society. For example, the um, the four-stage ashrama system, where if you're in the student phase, brahmacharya, then your purpose is to acquire knowledge. In grihastha, your purpose is to build a family, to generate and distribute that wealth for the betterment of society. In vanaprastha, you work on yourself, refining the self, and begin to withdraw from society. And in the sannyas ashram, you have completely withdrawn from society, and the work is entirely on refining our knowledge of the self. That is based on the ashrama stages. But there are other changes. The varna, the chosen profession, the chosen field of action is also important. You may choose to be a warrior if you're a fighting type, and if you feel your energy flow in the state of a battle, or an argument, or a war, then you're a warrior type predominantly, and that's what you honor and respect. Not in everyday situations, but you choose a profession that allows you to express that particular form of self-expression in a way that is amenable to the functioning of society. If you have a tendency to get the best out of you in a state of war, you have good hand-eye coordination, you actually have good ability to wield instruments or weapons. You could be a street fighter, but you could also be someone who's saving society as a member of the armed forces. And so you choose a profession and deploy it in a way that improves the welfare of society, loka samgraha. You might be a trader, for example, someone who exchanges information and builds trust and transacts, takes risks, deals in the taking of risk of the monetary variety. And then you can be a startup maker, you could be a trader, you could be in a profession that engages in commerce. You could be someone who's interested in the true nature of reality and is able to see and speak and articulate in a manner that influences other people. And so your chosen profession might be that where you're able to apply those skills. Or you might just like to work with your hands and your feet and doing repetitive action in a way that allows you to experience and express yourself that way. And so you choose a profession that allows you to express yourself as someone who works in the world and enjoys them. And you may at different times of stages, you might choose to be a different profession because your inner state may have changed. But understanding our Swadharma is very important, because only then are we working with a um, sharp instrument. And I'll talk about the sharp instrument hopefully soon. In fact, right next. So we've covered the first aspect, which is of the pointing finger. Remember, that points to ourselves, and the takeaway here is Swadharma. Now we move to the second digit. The second digit is the thumb. We move on now to the thumb itself, which we said is representing kosher, excellence. बुद्धियुक्तो जहातीह उभे सुकृतदुष्कृते तस्माद् योगाय युज्यस्व योगः कर्मसु कौशलम्. Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 2, verse 50, Sri Bhagavan, Sri Krishna is saying, one who prudently practices the science of work without attachment can get rid of both good and bad reactions in this life itself. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of working skillfully. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is the art of working skillfully. The joy of work comes from acquiring skill and excellence. Acquiring this excellence and working in a state of excellence is the project here. The word kaushal itself is quite interesting because the word kaushal comes from one etymology which is popularly taught in the Indian yoga system is from the grass kusha. Kusha grass is very sharp at one end, which is at the blade end, kusha end, and at the bottom it is of course the root itself. So the blade of grass at the top is very sharp, and if you hold it from the top, you're going to cut yourself. It is, to paraphrase into English a famous Hindi movie dialogue, it is not something for children to play with, because if you cut your hand, you might bleed. Those who know, they know. So the sharp edge of work, the sharp edge, and keeping a sharp edge of work is important in all areas and fields of work. Acquiring and maintaining excellence brings with it joy. The wielding of a sharp knife brings with it a lot more joy than wielding a rough knife or a rough blade. How so, you might ask? Well, I'll illustrate with a personal and somewhat painful experience myself. Now, as you can tell, verify with your own direct perception, I shave my head. I am bald and I shave the top of my head with a razor. Now, it is often that the shaving of my head with a razor. Now, I've done it for years. I don't need mirrors to see what's going on. I simply shave just as easily as I'm moving a comb or a pen through the back of my head, just as simply as this. But several things are at work here. The blade is extremely sharp, and if the blade is pointed in a way that's different from the curvature of the head, I will cut my skin and I'll bleed. So if I have to pay close attention to the curvature of the head and align that to the movement of my razor, I also have to keep a very sharp razor. If I have old blades, I'm going to apply more force and cut myself. I also have to apply just the right amount of force. If I apply too little force, nothing happens. If I apply too much force, then cutting and bleeding happens. Just right. It is a skillful act in itself. And this one time, I was shaving, and because I shave every day, I don't really pay attention to the act of shaving, and I was in a particular rush at this time. And so this day, I happened to have an older razor blade, the kind that has 3 or 4 blades. Now they keep adding more blades to it, but it was old, and I wasn't paying attention, and I was really trying to rush through the act. And then, lo and behold, I cut through, and there's a 4-inch gash right here on my skull, bleeding all the way through. I still have some of that gash over here, but it has healed over the years. I took that very vivid example of my bleeding head as a reminder that yoga is skill at work. Several things are going on in this action of shaving my own head. I need to pay attention to the curvature of the head, the changing, ever changing nature of the circumstance. I need to have a very sharp instrument. I need to let the energy flow in a smooth and continuous manner, not too much and not too little. And I need to do this in a practiced and skillful manner. Any mistake in this process, and I'm going to cut and bleed. And while that is true for shaving your head, it is also true for every action. So keeping our instrument sharp of acquiring skills. For example, I make these videos and I learn to edit those videos, and I try to learn those videos, the video making skills, because I get joy from learning, but I also get joy from my virtuoso skill. I enjoy being able to do things in a skillful manner better than if I had to brute force everything, because brute force only creates damage and you bleed. So acquiring and sharpening the saw, as Franklin Covey said, sharpening the saw, sharpening the instrument of our capabilities is an essential part of karma yoga. Yoga karma sukashalam. But not merely the sharpening of our tools or using excellent tools. For example, I'm a fountain pen aficionado. If you know me, you know that I have a completely unyogic weakness for fountain pens. I have all manner of writing instruments that I buy and acquire, and I take special pleasure in them. I try to understand what makes a good pen a good pen. I like to buy good quality pens, whether expensive or not is not the point. And I enjoy the act of writing with good pens because it brings me joy. So this bringing of joy is important. What's also important is an understanding of the ever-changing circumstance that we're working with. And that's how skill is applied, because you're paying attention to the world outside and inside. Your swadharma is not something static and fixed in time. It is always responding to context. So being extremely aware of the context and the ever-changing context and circumstance and time, and being able to effectively wield your skills is swadharma. So now we've covered two important aspects of karma yoga. Swadharma. I misspoke the second time. We've covered two things. One is swadharma, and the second is yoga karma sukashalam. Yoga is excellence at work, and that excellence that brings with it joy and timelessness. I don't have time today to talk about timelessness, but you should, in your spare time, explore flow psychology on your own time, and you'll get to hear more about this. We'll move along. Now we move to a really interesting idea of non-doership. We go to Kartala, the little pond or pool at the base of the palm, this Kartala, and we are going to save in it two ideas, or one idea of non-doership from three specific verses. But first, I tell you a story. So there is a herd of elephants that is passing through the jungle, and they have to cross over the river through a man-made rope bridge. And so the elephants are raising quite a dust and swinging gracefully as elephants do, and walking and swinging gracefully. And the elephant now begins to walk on the bridge, the rope bridge, and the rope bridge now begins to sway. The rope bridge begins to sway, a giant, heavy rope bridge, very large rope bridge. But as the elephant walks on it, the rope bridge is swaying, swaying, swaying. swaying until the elephant reaches the other side and crosses over and passes on to the other side of the river. All this while, a flea is sitting on the shoulder of the elephant. And now the flea exults and screams loudly at the elephant at having moved such a large bridge with his own weight. He says, "Brother," to the elephant, "brother, you surely shook that one, huh?" The elephant, unmindful of the flea, keeps walking. But the flea is filled with this sense of achievement that I, along with this elephant, have shaken a whole bridge. I am so powerful. And that is how many of us feel. That we are doing things that are actually just universe's energies flowing through space and time, and in some way we are minor players in this eventuality or in this happening, and we take credit. The elephant, of course, is unmindful of the flea, does not hear the screaming of the flea or the exultation. The elephant keeps walking along. And so the forces that are at work keep doing what they're doing, and here we are, mere mortal humans, thinking that we have shaken that bridge. My friends, we have not shaken any bridge. All the sense of achievement that we have is futile, and we must surrender it. We must let go. There is a deluded self-identification. We falsely identify ourselves with this physical body, and this physical body with the actions and the success that might come with it. Not necessarily with the failures, not many people do, but with success. Sri Bhagavan Uvach. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vibhudatma karta hammiti manyate. Bhagavad-Gita chapter 3 verse 27. Sri Bhagavan Uvach. Sri Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, all activities are carried out by the three modes of material nature. But in ignorance, the soul, deluded by false identification with the body, thinks itself to be the doer. Falsely identifying ourselves to be the doer. Now, you can try this experiment at any lake or any moving water body where you take a branch, a tree branch, and you throw it into the water. And the tree branch moves. It moves. And then it gets stuck at a rock and it keeps moving up and down almost as if it's alive. But it's not alive, it's just moving under the forces that are animating it. And in the Gita, we talk about the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. And those three gunas are animating our being, sometimes through ignorance, sometimes through action, sometimes in clarity and sight. Those three gunas are acting inside as well as outside. And then later in the Gita, it is said, guna guneshu vartante. Each guna is acting upon itself, inside and outside. And this is the way of the material world, this entire material creation. This is how it moves and works. But we falsely identifying ourselves as the movers of this entire this drama. Ahankar vimudatma. Aham karta iti manyate. I am the doer. Falsely deluded by the sense of ego, we start believing that I am the doer. And this sense of doership deludes us. And to be situated in a state of karma yoga is to be situated in a state of surrender. At the end, everyone surrenders, because no one has lived forever. No one who says they have achieved anything continues to live forever. All our actions just dissolve back, and the continuity that precedes us continues long after we have come and gone. And so ultimately everyone surrenders. But to be in a state of karma yoga is to surrender at the beginning, is to recognize that the lower self is only a means, an instrument in the overall game, the overall lila of the higher self, and to surrender the lower self to the higher self. Sri Krishna elsewhere in the Bhagavad-Gita says, Sarvarambha Parityagi, to surrender right at the beginning, all the action and all the fruits of that action, and recognizing that it's the divine self that is animating this body, that is acting through the means of this body, and whatever that divine self, that divine energy wants to do, we let it do it, let him do it. And the fruits, of course, therefore, are not ours, but belong to the doer. That is not us. Naivam kinchit karomiti yukto manyeta tattvavit Pashyan Shivan Sprishan Jigran Ashnan Ashnan Gachan Swapan Shwasan. The idea here is Nashkarmya, the non-doership, to understand and enjoy a sense of non-doership while doing everything. In the Taoist system in China, this is known as Wei Wu Wei, which is doing, not doing. Remaining absorbed in the self, the knower of reality should think, I certainly do not do anything, even while seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving, sleeping, breathing, speaking, releasing, holding, opening and closing the eyes, remembering that the organ function in relation to the object of the organs. Understanding that not only are we not doing anything, nothing, even in this physical body, belongs to us. There is nothing to which we claim ownership of ourselves. We cannot change consciously the process of digestion, the process of breathing in and out. We can stop our breath, but not too long. Or excretion, all these vayus, these energies flow independent of the conscious self. So understanding that we are animated by a higher intelligence, and therefore ourselves is not doing anything, ourselves therefore does not claim credit for any of the outcomes that may come. And understanding and enjoying that state of non-doership, even while engaged in the world in complete action. Not condemned to inaction, but completely engaging in action while being in a state of inaction. Inaction at the first and inaction at the second. Now, a very interesting example of this is a practical example of the Metro Man in India. This is E. Sridharan, who's known as Metro Man. Now, those of us who grew up in India may remember the time when Konkan Railway was laid out, a very ambitious project. And I grew up in Delhi, and at that time, the idea of the metro rail was around, and it was interesting that the metro rail, the concept had been around. I remember reading it. Even now, I remember reading it in the press. And I also remember laughing at the idea of the metro rail because it seemed like a foolhardy project. Who can actually put up a rail in a society like New Delhi where you can't do anything without having to, run into local resistance? So who can deliver the rails? Who will find the money? How will it be done? But here is one man, E. Sridharan, who, after he worked on Konkan Railway, was asked to deliver the Delhi Metro project, and he took it on and he delivered. And not only did he deliver Delhi Metro, he's then the progenitor of all the metro rails that are set up all over India successfully. And they've been running now for over a decade all over India. And in his room, he is, of course, a karma yogi. And there's a book written about him called Karma Yogi that I highly recommend. And in his room, he keeps a verse from Yoga Vasishtha, where Valmiki is saying this to Bhagwan Ram, who is a young man who has come to, sorry, not Valmiki, but Vashishta, is saying to Bhagwan Ram that the following. He's saying, Karyam karomi nacha kinchit aham karomi. Karyam karomi, which is I perform the deed, nacha kinchit aham karomi. But I am not the one who does it. I perform the deed, but I am not the one who does it. All these great acts of building the Konkan rail or the metro rail or this or that, all of those have been done by me, but I am not the one doing them. Because I have already surrendered my ego at the beginning. I have already said that if you need this project to be done, take hold of this instrument, this sharp blade of the self, and now act in this world through this instrumentality of my being. It is you that acts through me. It is your act and your fruits. It is nothing for me. We go on. We are also not attached to these karma, to these actions or the fruits of those actions. Namam karmani nimpanti, name karma phale spruha, iti mam yo bhijanati, karma bhirna sabadhyate. Actions do not taint me. For me, there is no hankering for the results of action. One who knows me thus does not become bound by actions. I am not the one who acts. I am not tainted by these actions because I am not hankering for the actions or their fruits. And therefore, the Sanskrit word being used here is limpanti. In Hindi, we say lipatna, to stick, to attach. And there is no sticking or attaching of these actions. Non-stick actionware, like your non-stick cookware. Non-stick actionware, unbound. Because I am no longer present in the action. It is divine grace that flows through me and that action happens. The action and its results are not mine. And therefore, I do not hanker for the fruits of those actions. And therefore, whoever knows this and acts thus is not bound by their action. They're simply unbound. And with that, we cover the next finger, which is essentially the finger of non-doership. This is not the finger, this is the kartala. So now we've got the kartala, non-doership, karma sukashalam, the thumb, and the swadharma. We'll move along to time. Time itself acts outside of our bodies. It precedes us and follows us. We live essentially in a great space-time complex. We're aware of space, of course, but we should also be aware of time that causes erosion, that creates and destroys societies and civilizations. Time does all the actions itself. And for this, we of course look at the clock or the kalai. The tick-tock tempo of moving everything. Elsewhere in the Gita, I don't cite the verse here, but amongst the measurer, I am time. Kalayatam karma, kalosmi. So I am time amongst the measurers, the tick-tock measuring of everything, the passage of time itself. I am, Sri Krishna says, and this is the creator, the God, Paramatma himself saying that I am time. And here too, and this is of course a famous verse. And this famous verse is from, of course, chapter 11, verse 32. And Arjun has already been shown the vast universal form of Sri Krishna, and in this case Vishnu, and then he is devouring the opposing army. And he's saying this, Kalosmi lokakshaya krit praviddo lokan samahartumiha pravritta itepi tvam na bhavishyanti sarve yevasthita pratyanikeshu yodha. The Blessed Lord says, I am the world destroying time. Kalosmi lokakshaya krit praviddo. Time, the Supreme God, with his limited adjunct of the power of action, grown in stature, pravidda means expanding, mighty. And now I am engaged in annihilating the creatures. Even without you, rite pitvam na bhavishyanti sarve. Even without you, all these warriors who are arrayed in the confronting armies will cease to exist. So how must you act, Arjun? Well, he says, Tasmat tvamuttishta yasho labhasva jitva shatrun bhungshva rajyam samriddham maye vaita nihatah purvameva nimittam matram bhavasam savyasachin. Interesting use of the word savyasachin. Savyasachin, of course, is two-handed, someone who is dexterous, ambidextrous, right hand and left hand, and therefore arise and attain honor. You're a nimitta, you're a means of the action, and therefore arise and attain honor. Tasvat tvamutishta yasho labhasva. Conquer your foes and enjoy prosperous rulership. Jintva shantrun bhungshva rajyam samriddham. Enjoy prosperous rulership. By maya vaita nihata purvameva. Previously, these warriors have already been devoured and slain by me. You only, nimitta matram bhavasavya sachin. You only have to be an instrument of my work, O expert archer. Savya sachin is translated here as expert archer, but what it really means is ambidextrous. And what I like to say is, with both hands engage in action, and knowing that it is me, time outside of your individuality, me, the universe energy that is flowing through your being, let that energy work through you, and then arise and attain honor. By all means, become a ruler and enjoy the fruits of your labor, fruits of this action. But recognize that it is me acting through you and surrender already. Begin with this sense of surrender. Next, we move on to the middle finger. We're now looking at the hankering for success and the need to continuously reinforce our sense of being a successful person. And in Karma Yoga, we do not hanker for success. We hanker for excellence. We strive for excellence. We don't necessarily care if the outcome is successful or not. And that's the point of the failure gym, and I'll talk about this. This is a very famous shloka in the Bhagavad-Gita and quite well known to people, even though those that may not be familiar with the overall message of the Gita. This verse is generally well known, which is Karmanyeva dhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhu ma te sangostva karmani. Shri Bhagavan, Shri Krishna is saying, you have the right to perform your prescribed duties, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, nor be attached to inaction. Now, this is a really interesting concept of doing the duty to its fullest, and then not necessarily attaching to the outcome. Of course, one should not be attached to the outcomes or to inaction, which is being said here. Usually, people stop at the first line of this shloka, which is Karmanye Vadikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana. And people think of this as one must not be attached to the fruits. That is true, but it is not that you cannot enjoy the fruits of labor. It is simply that you must not act in anticipation of the fruit, and you must certainly not keep the fruits of your labor to yourself. That's not why you're doing your activity. A good example, of course, this is your own backyard. I live in California, and the summers here are really nice. And I have a lot of fruit trees. I have grapes, apples, um, plums, blue hearts, and apricots, and lemons in the winter. And I work to prune the tree, I work to water the tree, and do whatever else is needed to maintain this, fertilize, and all the good stuff. And then the rest of the work is done by nature. And the fruits that come out, interestingly, we can't consume all the fruits ourselves. We have to give it away to our friends and family. And that's true for fruits of our labor as well, not just merely fruits on the trees outside. The work that we do, we're doing it for society. And when we work for society, the society itself prospers. And that prosperity rubs off on everybody, including ourselves. And then at that point, it is okay to enjoy prosperity because the society is more prosperous. It is not okay to do something just for yourself. You would not cook just for yourself. You would not work just for yourself. You work for the betterment of society. In the Gita, this is called Loka Samgraha, or a desire to improve the welfare of society. And when you improve the welfare of society, the fruits will result. A more stable society, a more economically prosperous society, a more peaceful society has its fruits. With its fruits, a sense of peace, a sense of well-being, a sense of better health, and that improves everyone's lot in the society, including your own. The other thing that people assume out of this, that it's not worth working because if I don't care for the results, then why should I even work? And so people get attached to inaction. A lot of people who leave society tend to be people who don't want to feed this economic system, and they drop out of society. And that's not being asked for here either. Do not be attached to even inaction. You have to participate in society. That's just the way humans are designed. And in that participation, you must help improve society, not by inaction. You have to continuously engage in action. Elsewhere in the Gita, Sri Bhagavan says that not in the three worlds is there any work for me to do, and yet I'm always at work because my example serves as an inspiration to everyone. So you have to work even if it's to inspire other people. Another conclusion from this is this unattachment to success or failure. And this comes to a very interesting concept that has become more and more prevalent and popular these days, especially with the rise of Silicon Valley, which is the necessary need to accept failure on the way to success. To understand that, for example, when Thomas Edison was inventing the light bulb, there was a lot of competition across the world on creating the first stable light bulb, and people were experimenting with different levels of vacuum and filaments and so on. And when Thomas Edison found 1,000 ways of failing, 1,000 ways that didn't work, you could have said, well, that's just money wasted. But no, he said, I haven't failed. I have just found 1,000 ways this thing does not work. It's still data. And this need to fail and create data which will create a feedback loop which will eventually lead to success is central to all of Silicon Valley. A great example of this I'm going to cite is from Amazon. Amazon, every year, Jeff Bezos writes a letter to his shareholders, often a reflective essay on something on top of his mind. And this particular essay caught my attention. Quite interesting because he was talking about failure. Failure needs to scale too. So as a company becomes larger, it needs to take larger and larger risks. And it takes larger risks, it will subject itself to the risk of larger failure. And that's okay. We'll be experimenting, Jeff Bezos said, with multi-billion-dollar failures, and it's okay because that's how we will know we will succeed. We will only win big if we bet big, and betting big against overwhelming odds means that you're going to fail, and accepting that failure is the only way to move forward. This is now built into Silicon Valley thinking. Next verse in the same chapter 2 of Bhagavad-Gita, Shri Krishna says, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddha siddhayo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Chapter 2 verse 48. Being established in yoga, O Dhananjaya, undertake action, casting off attachment and remaining equipoised in success and failure. Equanimity is yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate, which is this equanimity towards success and failure, is yoga. Why? Because we understand that the energy, universal energy, is flowing through us, and on its actions and on its wishes is their success or failure. Our individual action is only a piece of the overall action. And so we come to this. Now, the interesting thing here is, in Silicon Valley, there is also, I think I'll cover some of that later as well when we come to faith. So the thing here is failure, Jim, and the takeaway is to build a strong appetite for success as well as failure, and to have an equal attitude toward both. This is important because only then can we improve our craft. Only then can we learn what works and what doesn't. Thinking of success and failure as just data in a continuous process of action. And this allows us to become more resilient. This allows us to become more, be able to bounce back with the same vigor and zeal, and not lose energy in self-blame or lose energy in just feeling bad about any failures. Simply pick yourself and keep moving. And this is central to entrepreneurial activity in the Bay Area, but it's central to all enterprise anywhere. The ability to understand and build a big appetite for failure. All right, so how do you fix it? How do you do it? I like to tell people to join a failure gym, which is to say, just the way when you go to a gym and your muscles, if your muscle fibers are like this, you're trying to break those fibers, because only then can your muscle become bigger and stronger. Otherwise, your muscles are small, you break those muscles and they become larger. And so when you go to a gym, you go to break your muscles, and that allows you to build your muscles. It's the same with failure. Breaking your ability, testing something to the edge of your ability improves your ability. Next time you'll be stronger, and then you can push the point of failure out further and further. And so in your work, I'd urge you to think about how you can think about any recursive process you're involved in, and learning to fail and improving your outcome from every cycle to the next. All right. Moving along to equanimity, equanimity towards all, equipoise towards all, and equanimity towards all. This is the ring finger. Here, what Karma Yoga is about is simply the understanding that everyone in society has an equal standing as yourself. The only thing different about you from other people is that your unique perspective, your point of view, seems to radiate out from an innermost self, that which you know by your name and this body. But once you start to understand the true nature of reality, once you're in a state of yoga, you recognize that all of this is the same creation, and therefore every creation, every aspect of this creation is at an equal level. And then when you act, you're acting with no preferences or prejudices. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Shunichayeva Shmapakecha Pandita Sarmadarshina. Chapter 5, verse 18, Sri Krishna says, the learned ones look with equanimity on a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, a cow, an elephant, and even a dog, as well as the eater of dog's meat. This is a wide range of people that are being cited, which is simply a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, not just a proud person born into a particular family, but someone who's filled with knowledge and humility, because that's what the true, real knower of truth is, filled with humility. So, someone who's a knower of truth, a cow, an elephant, a dog, or even a dog cooker. And in traditional Indian society, a dog cooker was the lowest strata of society, because no one would want to associate with dog cookers. That's the society we're talking about. And someone who's a learned person, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, someone who has knowledge and the Vinaya that comes from it, is able to see everyone with the same light. As we serve in a state of karma yoga, we look upon other people as equal. We serve not with a sense of superiority that, oh, look, you poor thing, I'm serving you, but as an equal. You might serve a master, you might serve a lover, a friend, a relative, a child, a servant. You might serve anyone. It doesn't matter what their relative position to you is. You serve them with the same attitude of service. Because what matters is the ability to engage with them and serve them. And so, to remember this over here is simply the engagement ring, the ring finger, and the need to connect with and serve everyone. Now we come to the last of the 7 attributes. So far we've covered time in the Kalai, no doership in the Kartala, Kaushala in the thumb, Swadharma in the pointing finger, Nashkarma and the Phaleogem in the middle finger, the Equanimity in the engagement finger, and now we come to pinky finger. This is quite interesting. Now, we make promises to children when we promise something, and then they say promise, and you say, yeah, pinky promise. So remember that with your pinky finger. Now, what we're saying here is interesting. Someone who works in a state of karma yoga is not filled with doubt. They have unwavering, unshakable belief. This is important because only then can you apply full energy and full surrender to your activity. If you're doubtful of the end goal, if you're doubtful of the purpose of your action, then that doubt is going to gnaw away. Like a beaver eating at the base of a tree, it'll eventually cut the tree down. It's the same here. But the problem, of course, is we live in the modern world and we are taught to doubt. In fact, we're predominantly taught a system where we learn to question everything. And that questioning attitude extends into things that are known and knowable, but out of that, further into things that are unknown and unknowable as well. And in those things, you cannot doubt because there is no way to validate your doubt, but you can believe. Oh, ye of little faith. And so think of belief as a muscle. If you are able to flex the belief muscle, then you can build your belief. If you don't have the ability to believe, you're forever going to be doubtful. And when you're doubtful, you're going to be unhappy. How? Agnyascha shraddhadhanascha sanchayatma vinashyati nayam lokosti na paro na sukham sanchayatmana. Sri Krishna is again saying, but persons who possess neither faith nor knowledge and who are of a doubting nature, sanchayatma, suffer a downfall, vinashyati. For the skeptical souls, sanchayatmana, there is no happiness either in this world or the next. Nayam lokyosti na paro. So there is no sukha in this world or the next world if you're filled with doubt. Why? Because you're always questioning. You're always questioning your own self. You're always questioning the will of the universe. You're also always questioning your purpose and the support of people around you. You're just always questioning, and that questioning leads to a downfall. Why? Let me tell you a little story. A few years ago, I used to go snowboarding, and California is going through periods of drought and proper rain, and this was a drought year, so we didn't have much snow. So I went to learn snowboarding at the time for a couple of years, and they taught a really interesting thing. So I stopped going after that because I fell enough times and then my knees began to hurt. But when I did go to the class, there was an interesting thing that they taught, which is to say, when you're strapped on a snowboard, the way a snowboard works, your feet are strapped onto a board. You can't move your feet separately, you have to move them together. And you're hurtling in this direction. Your feet are strapped this way, you're going down this way. And so how do you steer yourself? You steer yourself with your eyes. Because they said, look where you're going. So if you're going down this way and you're looking this way, you steer in that direction. If you're looking that way, you steer in that direction with your eyes. So look where you're going, or the flip side is you'll go where you're looking. And often, and which is the reason I fell enough times, is often my weight is going this way and I'm looking somewhere else. So my body wants to go here while my snowboard is heading in that direction. My momentum is there, but my eyes are signaling here. Naturally, I'm going to topple over and fall. And so this is what happens when you're looking the wrong way. Why is this story interesting? Because if you look at people that have learned to only doubt, be pessimistic and non-believers, you will always find that things go south, wrong direction all the time, because if you don't look where you're going to go where you're looking. And where are you looking? At points of failure. You're looking at reasons to not trust people, and they will not give you reasons to trust them. And so when you learn to believe, you also learn to trust. And when you learn to trust people, you will find them to be trustworthy. And that's an interesting part in Karma Yoga. Let me give you a really interesting example from India. This is a really interesting story because it plays out in quite a dramatic fashion. An unbelievable activity at the beginning becomes reality by the end through the sheer act of believing, and that belief creates with it ways for that belief to come true. So let me show you the story. This is told by the husband of Sushma Swaraj. Sushma Swaraj was a very well-loved minister in the Indian government, and she was at one point a health minister. This is long before she died. And in Delhi, there's a famous institute called the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS. And at the AIIMS, you have the best doctors in India. And she would see that people would come with their families, and of course they're the sick people in the family from all over India. And the family members would sit outside, stay outside, and essentially crowd outside the hospital because they had nowhere else to go because they are not from here. So her question was not why these people are crowding here, is let me find why they're coming here in the first place. Where are they coming from? She finds the states where people are coming from. She concludes that they do not have good medical facilities there. And so she decides we must build 6 AIIMS in different cities around the country from the places these people are coming from. And but then what happens? How is that going to make itself happen? So this is 2003, and Sushma Swaraj notices that this is going on. She could not expand the Delhi AIIMS because it's only on a small parcel of land, 25 acres, not large enough to expand it to 2x or 3x. Plus, she said, why should you expand it right here when I can build a equivalent facility in a different state? So she decides that, and then she not only makes a decision. This is not a personal decision. She's not doing this to win elections. She's doing this for loka samgraha, which is to improve the welfare of society. But does she have the wherewithal? Those states are not necessarily run by her political party. The money for these is not necessarily available, and land procurement is notoriously difficult in India. But she decides she's going to pay attention to this act continuously. So she sets aside 1 hour, AIIMS hour, every week, I guess, every day, and that she relentlessly plugs away at this problem. She reaches out to the chief ministers and says, give me 100 acres of land. Why so much land? So helicopters could come in. Remember, people from rural, mountainous regions have to bring their loved ones to the hospital. So sometimes you might have to do a helicopter rescue. So she said, I need 100 acres of land. And she then convinces the finance minister to give her the money. Then she says, she, again, relentlessly keeps plugging away at the problem, solving one problem at a time, keeping the long-term vision of belief with belief. And then she says, if there is any question that comes up, she simply said, "Wo mere Krishna karenge," which is, this problem is going to be solved by God Himself. Right? She was filled with faith, and that faith allowed her to find solutions. She said, problems find their own solutions. She was not daunted or stopped or distressed by it. Election season was coming, and she plugged away until she was able to get all the 6 AIIMS set up. And now, of course, in India, you have all these 6 AIIMS that are functioning. This is a vibrant and amazing example of faith, the power of Shraddha, how that works. Another aphorism that I really love, I've always loved it, even when I was in college, is begin with the end in mind. Keep an end goal, which is not a personal end goal, but keep that end in mind, and then plug away at the problem, and hold steadfast in your belief that the end outcome that you desire will come about, that the universe will conspire in your favor to make that thing come true. And that belief automatically opens doors and creates opportunity. That's the interesting part. Of course, we are taught to doubt, and you're going to see in the image, this is doubting Thomas, who is, of course, notoriously known for doubting Christ. When He is risen, Christ says, I am your friend Jesus. And Thomas says, well, how do we know you're Jesus? And he's inspecting in this painting the wounds to make sure that this is the same person. Doubters are going to doubt. And this sense of doubt holds us back from believing ourselves, holds us back from using all the help that the universe is willing to provide, because we're not able to believe. Another example of that, of staying determined on your dream, is, of course, all of Silicon Valley. I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is Silicon Valley, and this is a great testament to the power of belief. One more story from my childhood. My father was a follower of Shirdi Sai Baba. In Shirdi Sai Baba temple, when you go, there are 3 things that are written behind the murti. On top it says Sabka Malik Ek, which is the creator of all, or the director of all activity is one, which is a affirmation of the unity of all creation. And then Shraddha and Saburi. Shraddha is this belief, unwavering, unshaking, unquavering belief. And saburi is patience. Not only do you have to have belief, you also have to have patience. And this is exemplified in the work that Silicon Valley does. When people create a startup, they're creating something that isn't a sure thing. They're creating something that doesn't exist. They're creating something that need not exist in the linear flow of time. But they want to change the shape of the universe. They want to make a dent in the shape of the universe. They want to create services and opportunities that do not exist. So they have to believe into a future. When Jeff Bezos starts off by saying, I'm going to build the world's biggest book house, and then calls it with the audacity of calling it Amazon after the widest, biggest river in the world, then you know that he's not merely building a bookstore, he's changing the shape of commerce. And he has, over the last 25 years, make that come true. But no one believed that at the start. Not many people bought into his vision. People laughed, then people wondered and marveled, and now, of course, it's pretty obvious what he's done in hindsight. But it wasn't always obvious. But this ability to believe, this ability to transmit the belief, and also to create a Steve Jobs-like reality distortion field where you believe something before you meet this person, and then you're in the vicinity of this person, and somehow this person is distorting your reality. And that means you've begun to believe new things. You've begun to believe in a new future that is different from the future you imagined in the past. This belief and the transmittal of this belief is essential to all entrepreneurial activity, Silicon Valley or otherwise. You're creating something whose outcomes are not known and maybe not even knowable until you do it. In one of the famous ads that Steve Jobs put out, he calls this out. This ad is to the crazy ones. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. Right? They change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. And then here's the punchline of that ad. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. You have to be crazy enough to believe in things that you want to believe in. Not be filled with doubt, not be filled with questioning, not be filled with confusion. What should you be instead filled with? Well, you should be filled with the enthusiasm of God. Let me explain. This should have been something I should have began this entire talk with. But because we're quoting Steve Jobs, we're just going to do one more thing and then quote him completely. This is the one more thing, which is enthusiasm. When you act in a state of enthusiasm, you're acting in a state of karma yoga. How so? By definition. The word enthusiasm literally means to be filled with God. To be filled with the sensation, the vibration, the energy of God acting through your means, which I've talked about all through this lecture, is the essential core of karma yoga. To let the individual self be so narrow and the entirety of the self being filled with God. So how does it feel to work in enthusiasm? In my case, when I work enthusiastically, the hearer hears it and hears it from their heart. They will hear it in their heart. They are moved by what I'm saying because I am moved as I say it. My heart is filled with joy. My arms are filled with energy. My energy tingles through the entire body. I have cold sweat running through my body. My eyes are tinkling. My voice is quivering. I have a lot more energy than the usual self that is flowing through me when I work in a state of enthusiasm. And in that state of enthusiasm, time flies and things happen on their own. And that is also the meaning of Karma Yoga. So let's sum up and carry back in one hand everything we need to take back with us. So now you can look at your own hand and just try to remember what we've talked about. We'll begin with the thumb. Yoga karmasu kaushalam, excellence and learning, continuously learning and improving your craft is Karma Yoga. Being true to your own inner nature, Swadharma, is a part of Karma Yoga. Being equanimous to failure and success is Karma Yoga, middle finger. Looking at all as one creation and respecting all of creation in the same way is Karma Yoga. Serving everyone with the same vigor and respect is Karma Yoga. Being filled with the ability to believe, the ability to let belief guide us, is the pinky finger. And then in the palm of the hand, we have the knowledge of non-doership. We are not the one who's doing things are happening through me, but I'm not the one doing them. Karyam karomi na kinchit kaham karomi. And then finally, time. We think of time, the vast sweep of time, which is truly making everything happen. And God Himself is time, who is acting through the medium of the self. So 7 things that we're carrying away as part of our lesson here in Karma Yoga. With that, I would like to bid you farewell, and I look forward to more conversations with you on the subject of Karma Yoga. Thank you very much. Namaskar.